Welcome to the Godzilla podcast. I am Joe.
I'm Drew.
And today, Drew, what are we watching today?
Varan the Unbelievable?
I think so. I think it's Varan the Unbelievable, the English edition. We have not yet seen the Japanese edition.
No, neither of us own that currently.
And
Joe, what do you think about that title? Just the title for a movie. Varan the Unbelievable.
It is unbelievably bad.
Yeah, it's too many syllables. Too many syllables.
Varan the Unbelievable is also a very hard movie title to remember for some reason.
Yeah, no.
This whole week I've been like, what movie did we watch?
I swear the last two podcasts we've recorded, I've been saying Varan the Invincible because that's what I thought it was.
Which is a totally better title. Yeah. I'll give you that, Drew.
And I made that up by by remembering the name wrong, and it was better than the actual title. It really is too many syllables.
Varan the Unbelievable.
Because I just don't see too much unbelievable about this monster, but we'll get into that.
If you want to watch this along with us, you might have the DVD at home. If you don't, it is available currently on Amazon Prime.
And that is how Joe and I viewed it, because there is a way to purchase this film. I'm pretty sure it's the exact same version we're watching for free with an Amazon Prime membership. Instead, you'd be paying $10 for that, and it's only a DVD rip of the thing, because the distributors have the rights to distribute this film, yet it wouldn't be profitable for them to just have them produced. So they produce them on demand. So the one version that you'll be paying $10 for, and spoilers, it's not a good film at all. So I would recommend having an Amazon Prime membership, not paying $10 for a burnt DVD copy of this.
Oh boy. And I don't know. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to get the Japanese version, but
we have a site.
I think I know how we're going to get the Japanese version.
This site that shall not be named and has been named so many times on this show.
Boy.
It's a good site. It's a bad site. It's a good one though.
All right. Well, gee. Yeah. If you've never listened to the show before, which is odd that you're starting with Varan the Unbelievable, like you've been searching through the internet, going for I need to listen to a podcast that talks about Varan the Unbelievable.
At very least, you're looking for a podcast that contains giant monsters, but this is like bottom of the barrel. So.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Yes.
Especially this version. I'm sure the Japanese one is at least a little bit better, right?
It always is.
So far, yeah, that has been the case.
Yes.
If you've never listened to us before, we are a podcast / commentary, which means that you can watch the movie along with us. When we say to press play, that is when you press play. So get your DVD players ready. Get your Amazon Prime.
Boot it up.
Boot it up. We are on the 000 mark, and we are going to start the movie in 3, 2, 1, go. Oh boy! Had you ever heard of this film before we approached it to watch it for the first time, me and you?
Fortunately, no, I had not yet. The reason we're delving into these, and we'll reiterate this multiple times, we went from our last Godzilla film, because here we're veering away from Godzilla just slightly, but still Toho Godzilla movies. This one not being Toho, this is an American production, using some of the footage that Toho produced for yada yada.
It's a lot like Godzilla King of the Monsters in that way.
Yeah, except done much more poorly. In the same vein, though. And no, I hadn't heard of it, but in looking up films regarding the monsters that are going to show up and destroy all monsters, I stumbled across, now we got to look up Varan. And next it'll be Frankenstein Conquers the World, which introduces Baragon. And then there may be something called Space Amoeba.
We're going to look into that then.
We will look into it.
All right. So this movie was originally released in Japanese, at least, the little Japanese parts that show up now and then in this film. That was released on October 14th, 1958. However, this version, I believe it was like 1962. 1962? Okay,
yep.
Yeah.
So it took them 4 years after backing out of a deal. So, Joe, what is the storied history of this film? Because it wasn't clean for either the Toho. Okay, it's a big jumbled mess. the back scenes, behind the scenes of this film, because originally it was going to be something called ABT, which I'm assuming was a subsidiary of ABC, which was being probably being overhauled or being like taken into its conglomerate.
Yeah.
Which they proposed a joint making a film that such as
they wanted to make a giant monster television film using Toho special effects.
Yeah, and so it was going to be a joint production.
This was going to be a joint production to produce an American film. This was going to be a Western film.
And it was going to be shown on television. That is the reason why, because I was puzzled, Joe. We've already covered 1956's Rodan, and that's in color.
Yes.
And it's produced by Toho. Okay, this was produced in 1958, and it's in black and white. So it's like, what? Are they going to step back here?
I believe this was the last kaiju film made in black and white, and that was because it was made for television at the time, which, of course, television TVs... I'm not even sure if they were around in 1958. They certainly weren't the thing. They certainly weren't popular. So
they definitely weren't in color.
If anything, they made this movie on the cheap for television for Western audiences, and they had a totally different story. For this movie, and I'm not even sure if it's available. Frankly, whatever version they were trying to make.
So what is available, and it is somewhat. They have
the deal dropped in production.
Yes, and they say that they had finished production mostly. I'm assuming that being an American and the Japanese joint production, that the bulk of the filming would have been taking place in Toho, if not all. And yet, before their American partners dropped out, I would assume that they were going to add some things in, because it appears that there's actually supposedly going to be 3 versions of this film. The one that was supposed to go onto American televisions, which was the joint production, that just got dropped. And so Toho ended up taking out certain story elements, cutting scenes, adding scenes, and making their own for a theatrical release in Japan. 4 years later-ish, I mean, it was released in 62, so maybe slightly before 4 years.
They were picked up. Yes. Crown International Pictures. They acquired the rights, and much like Godzilla King of the Monsters, as we said, they took an American actor and they stuffed him into this movie, and they removed a lot of the plot elements from the Japanese one, and they created what we're watching right now.
So, Joe, immediately what was noticeable for us as the audience in viewing this film was the strange cuts. What is that due to?
Okay.
These are strange cuts that take place during the American scenes. This is the American film scenes.
This is even more complicated.
All right. Oh, you found out more since our viewing.
This is more complicated than what we had.
No idea.
What we had thought of when we were watching the film. So here's what happened. They were shooting this movie for television, not the one we're currently watching, but the original Japanese production.
Yes.
They were shooting this movie for television, and thus they gave it the regular 4:3 aspect ratio, or what we all refer to as full screen. It's the box, right, that we're used to. And we'd be angry when our mom accidentally picked up a full screen DVD for Christmas, and it's like, come on, Mom, don't you know the difference? It says full screen. You need a widescreen. It's like, but son, we don't have a widescreen television. It's like, it's not a widescreen television. Like, they chop off the sides and they put it on the screen. You know, we all know this.
Yeah.
If we grew up in the DVD era, Blu-rays don't even have that option. Thank God.
Yeah, and especially late era DVDs, probably nowadays, very much less so.
Yeah.
But so early on DVDs, yeah.
They filmed it in full screen. And for the Japanese version, they wanted it in widescreen for theaters. And so they pan and scanned like the inside of the box in order to have a widescreen aspect ratio for Japanese theaters. Now, what has happened and is a mystery to me is that this Crown International Pictures, at least the version here available on Amazon, Crown International Pictures shot their own stuff.
Yeah.
And then put it into this movie. But what is confusing me is that this looks like it was filmed in widescreen and then cropped for television.
And why would you say it looks like that? Because, okay, in a single shot, as in the same things are going on screen, it hasn't cut to another frame, to another shot. Yet there's this weird
it's like
jump
to another part of the same shot.
Yes, exactly. And so you're in the middle
That's
of
what
watching
we've
someone do
deduced.
something. You're in the middle of watching a character act, and then all of a sudden, again, same shot. So you're looking at the same thing. It like jumps to another section of what would be a widescreen shot. So like, say for what we're viewing, it's actually the farthest left on the widescreen shot, but we're viewing like it in a box. And they decide they don't want that to be the focal point, but in all in a single shot, they just kind of jump cut, but it's not really a jump cut, and move it to the other section of the widescreen.
I think it is technically a jump cut.
Because a jump cut that doesn't appear very often.
Because it's using the same or nearly the same composition. Into two different shots.
Okay, that's a good way of describing what's happening. It's the same composition and they just move it. And
they're bad. And it's like framed terribly, which wouldn't, even a professional television director or cinematographer, anybody who's working on this, would never have framed it the way that they framed it. These shots are uneven looking and they're awful to watch, honestly. These American the American parts of this movie.
Before we realized it had been jumping, or before it had really jumped at all, I was viewing some of the shots and I'm like, okay, why is he so far off? Like the main actor Myron Healy is like super non-centered, and there's a lot of like blank area around him, behind him, that's completely wasted. There's nothing going on back there as to what the audience needs to take in, and so it was weird. And then we started seeing the jump cuts, and then we started speculating. And
yeah, that is a speculation, though. It is not necessarily fact. The one thing that could have been is that it was a slightly wider frame, and that the people who scanned this screwed up.
Did a horrible job.
Maybe
they just didn't care.
That's one possible thing. Or I suspect that it was shot in widescreen format for whatever reason and then cropped from there.
And you know what, Joe?
Which is the exact opposite of what happened in the Japanese version.
Maybe.
It is bizarre.
Maybe, but not likely. Frames are missing, because you know the whole scene that's coming up where, our main actor, Myron Healy, he's a commander, general, whatever, scientist. He's in the military, but he's a scientist.
Yeah.
He has a wife, Anne, who's Japanese, and at the very beginning, she's shown dictating for him as he's expositioning. Like, he just speaks in exposition in this film. That's all. That's like a good 90% of what his dialogue is. So he doesn't really talk. He just talks to move the story along, and often repeating himself. And so it just gets so boring very quickly. Oh, Myron Healy. I don't think that this man had enough charisma to hold the lead in this film, because Perry Mason, I don't remember his name actually, in King of the Monsters.
You can just call him Perry Mason. Raymond Burr. Yeah.
Raymond Burr. He had the charisma as an actor, and also the dialogue written for him and the scenes that he was in to hold the film. Because now, again, they're just making it for American audiences centered around one person, around a lead white male doing something heroic. And it doesn't work in this film. It did work, really, for in King of the Monsters. That's a passable film, and a good film, in my opinion. But
high quality B movie is what I would call that.
Very high quality. This is low tier B movie.
No, this is bad. This is a Z movie.
Even though a B movie is a distinction made for less than good older films, even less than good films nowadays. But what's a real B movie, Joe? Because this was shown on film, on TV. So excuse me, but a real B movie would have been the movie shown alongside or before like two movies in the theater. This never even made it there. So
no, you got a good point about that. So I'm a little saddened by the version that we have here. I certainly wish that I could at least. I think I read somewhere that there is a almost recreation of the original version.
I needed to mention a reconstruction. So here it is: a reconstruction of the TV version that would have originally shown here is included on both the Japanese and American DVDs. So if you did choose to pay that $10 to get the DVD burn of this movie, it has both this version and also a reconstruction of what it would have been as in the original production of it.
I have to get all three, Drew.
We're okay, Joe. I don't think it's a full reconstruction. They already cut out enough from this film. We'll see Varan or Obaki soon enough throughout this film. Yeah, Joe's eyes light up. Why do we say Obaki, Joe?
Why do we say Obaki, Drew?
Why did they in this film? That's how they refer to Varan throughout most of the film.
Oh, that's right.
They just keep saying Obaki.
No one ever says the name Varan in this movie.
The somewhat I would think that they put it in accidentally, actually. The only time we hear Varan said is in one of these scenes that they used from the Japanese version, of which, other than the scenes with Varan, they use very little, easily less than 20% of the film. And so the dialogue or the audio from those clips is playing, and they just somehow, because they don't even provide subtitles for the Japanese that they use in this film.
Right.
And throughout the dialogue there, the weird audio, which, to American audiences, it's like, okay, we're hearing Japanese and it's going on for a while. There's no subtitles. They mention Varan. And so it's like, oh, I think that's what this movie was called. Isn't that what it's called? Isn't that what the monster's called?
I love his child labor kid who is like a terrible worker, and he's still...
I had to mention right off the bat to Joe, I was like, so was this before, like, education for children was, like, widely...
I think so, actually.
Spread?
I actually think that is the case, first off. I think... I don't know my American history when it comes to public education, but I think there was something enacted in the 1960s for American education.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Whatever island he's on, I don't know the socioeconomic
a young boy can't even be
situation.
10, maybe 11, and he's just used.
He's their servant.
As their servant. And I believe what's already happened, Joe. The very strange thing that his wife Anne goes off to meet these two characters that appeared in the Japanese version of this film, and he refers to them as some weird names. They're like these they're made into these two reporters, like Kun and Young or something very weird. She's like going off to meet them. Do you remember this?
No.
And, oh, thank goodness. She goes off to meet them, Joe, and she's immediately back. Do you remember that? She leaves, and she's just back.
Oh,
like,
that was
just
so
snap.
weird. Yeah, I think we're actually going to get to that soon.
No, it just happened, I believe.
Oh, it just happened?
Yes.
Okay, how would I know? She just leaves the frame and then she's back.
Talking about taking you out of the film entirely, because we were, the dialogue makes it appear as if, okay, I'm about to leave. And then suddenly she's like jump cut. She's behind him, walking towards him. And he goes, how was your trip? wait, we're in the same like frame.
They didn't even bother with a fade out.
This makes me respect how they put Raymond Burr into King of the Monsters, how they implemented him within the film.
Oh, it's super clever.
Oh, extremely. This is like garbage comparatively, how they implemented in these American additional scenes.
So this is sort of the plot. He's a scientist doing experiments on the island. Experiments with killing fish or something like that. I don't even know.
Experiments with desalinating water.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's not. It does kill fish, but it has to do with him taking the salt out of saltwater lakes.
Yeah.
Or
salt water in general.
Yeah.
Probably he's just testing it in lakes.
Yeah. And so he tests it in this lake and kills a bunch of fish, and then
for the natives, ruining thereby their fish production.
It doesn't work, and then suddenly the monster appears like the next day, and we have. I don't even know if there's causation there. I have no idea if like what he did in the water pissed off the monster.
Well,
or if there were, there's legends about this monster in this lake, this saltwater lake that people do their dishes in and swim. They mention in. No, not swim. Bathe. That's right.
They bathe. In a saltwater lake.
So we live in Utah, Drew. Would you ever bathe in the Great Salt Lake?
Is it ever deep enough within the lake? You'd be making like
that's a good point.
Saltwater puddles, like angels, snow angels.
And also, because it's a salt lake filled with death and little brine shrimp, which are the only thing that live in it.
That sounds really metal. You're bathing in
salt lake. You're not going to get clean from that water, but apparently the locals bathe in this water.
Wash their dishes, and Joe and I went on to say use the bathroom in the water. And
I would also say, now I know we have the Great Salt Lake, so that's pretty much the only thing that I have reference for
around here. The Dead Sea.
How often are fish living in saltwater lakes?
I would assume
Dead Sea is dead. No one lives in the Dead Sea.
Nothing lives in the
Dead Sea.
I would assume that if it was only mildly salty, because I mean you got the ocean, man, and there's plenty of.
That's true.
There
are plenty of lakes that are like slightly salty. A Utah lake, the lake that we live next to, is a slightly salty lake. So a lot of types of fish can't live in it, but there's still some fish that live in it. But this saltwater lake that he plainly says it's not slightly salty or whatever the scientific term is. There is actually one, but it is a full on salt lake.
And all we can say,
and as there are fish,
as one major point of this, why as a scientist did he not do a small experiment beforehand? Seems fairly simple. Take some salt water. Put it in a jar in a lab. Do something in a lab on a small
scale. A wine barrel.
Exactly, a very small scale, and attempt to use your product in it to see what happens. Exactly. And then perhaps slowly introduce marine life and see how it can withstand it. No, the dude torpedoes the salinating or desalinating solution by the buckets.
Stop bathing in the salt lake. I gotta do an experiment.
He just throws it into the lake, killing off tons of fish, and he's almost cheery or surprised at the beginning when all these dead fish start popping up.
It depends on the life situation of these villagers. I just assume they're savages, like most of most of the villagers in these old movies are.
Well, of course, in the early 60s.
I'm surprised that there wasn't like 20 kids jumping into the water getting the dead fish.
I believe, Joe, it seems as if, especially with the timing in the film, when Obaki, Varan, we should just continue referring to him as Obaki because that is what he is in
I'm
this film.
I'm going to call him Varan because that's the name in my head.
Varan.
You can call him Obaki.
When he starts appearing, it's after he throws the desalinating solution in there, the untested, the highly dangerous, and he has no idea what's going on. Yet he's experimenting live tests right off the bat. And that's when Obaki starts showing up. And I believe through his dialogue, he mentions that it's not doing what it's supposed to, as in the desalinating solution's supposed to seep down lower to the bottom of the lake.
Oh, yeah,
and once
it's not
it gets
quite
to
getting
the bottom,
down there, as if there's a force field in the way.
Yeah, as if something's stirring up the water and not allowing it to get to the bottom. And that's Obaki.
Now, am I wrong in this? Because I was slightly confused by the ending. That desalinating stuff, was that what they were using against the monster in the balloons at the end?
I really don't. It's so confusing. I don't think it is, only due to the fact that I thought their radio was broken. I think that they make up the excuse that somehow it was, yet the radio's broken, and so they couldn't get to the main characters. Not of this film, but the main characters of the Japanese version, which just so happened to take part in the climax of the film when they defeat Varan. The heroic white man, Myron Healy in this film, isn't even there for the climax. No, he's fixing a broken radio.
He is not there for the climax at all. He doesn't save the day. There's really no point in him being in this movie. Even his experiment, it's shaky whether or not his experiment led to Varan coming out of the water.
Exactly.
I'm still not sure about that.
And then at the end, it ends on a positive note of, well, Anne, we found a note. I've petitioned the U.S. government, and they found us a lake stateside to go and attempt to desalinate. Let's go. And it's on a positive note. And you're like, no.
The Great Salt Lake.
No.
The one lake that could have been really easy to try this in. But instead I had to live out in the woods with these people.
Forcing them off their land.
Yeah, exactly. They were bathing in this stuff. I mean.
That was their livelihood. and their bath.
I can't tell you how many Salt Lake hobos just go and bathe in that Great Salt Lake.
Dude, they're more likely bathing in the little canal in the park here in Provo. I've seen it multiple times. It's horrifying. Yeah.
And then there's a lake that comes out of the canyon that comes through the Great Salt Lake. Yeah. There's not a lake, but a river. And I've seen a lot of hobos next to that thing while I'm on the train tracks.
Do you notice where our conversation is going? Because it's not on this film.
Oh.
Because this film's terrible.
Oh, this film is awful. She's cute.
Hey, she is.
The girl.
And,
I will say, you know what? This was filmed in the 1950s, and there is a biracial couple right there.
That's actually definitely
very forward thinking
already
for television.
Several years past this when we watched King Kong Escapes, which I want to say is late 60s. It might somewhere between 66 and 69. We've already covered that episode.
We screwed up the order.
Yeah, well, we just did it organically.
Too late.
But anyway, that film was controversial years later with the only the implication that the Japanese lead Takarada was, kind of being more protective than the American lead of the white female. But yeah, Joe, overall opinion of this film.
Well, I mean, we're not even near the end yet, which is, it hurts. It hurts thinking about that. My overall opinion on this film is that I think it's worse than Gigantus the Fire Monster.
You think it's worse?
I think it's a worse watching experience than Gigantus the Fire Monster. I tell you what, Gigantus the Fire Monster at least has Godzilla in it.
Yes.
Frankly, Varan...
Wait, no, it has Gigantus. It has Godzilla in that film?
Yeah, well, Gigantus, Godzilla, it's the same. It's the same monster, Drew. Believe it or not.
You're blowing my mind.
And at least we get to see that. In this movie, we get to see... Varan's not that impressive on top of a movie that is... he frankly doesn't show up even as an unimpressive monster. He doesn't show up nearly enough to at least go, hey, at least we can watch some good monsters in this movie.
It's coming up. And so before what happened, Joe, I've been binging from this 50 movie collection that was $8.50 at Walmart, and it's horror flicks from between the 20s, because it's got some silent era films, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Phantom of the Opera, and like Nosferatu up until
a bunch of
like the 60s. So it's got like the terror.
Okay.
It's got even Night of the Living Dead, which was 68, and
that's worth the $8 alone.
Oh, exactly. No, many of these films,
I'm
naming off ones that are of note, and other ones which you'll hear of, like White Zombie, things like that, which is Bela Lugosi.
I don't love that movie.
I
know that it's like
it.
a huge cult hit, but I've watched it and I don't love it. But go ahead.
Anyway, I always compare these to American horror, which this one actually is because it is an American film. We don't get to do too many of these on here. But the elements that comprise these films, because they obviously, it's going to an American audience, they cut it to suit American audiences or what they thought American audiences would eat up. One of the things is that Varan shows up and he's undetected in his first appearance. I suppose much like Godzilla, although Godzilla was on like an island where there really isn't a great population, and he shows up during a storm, which would also help cover him up even more. This is in Gojira, the first Godzilla 54, and then he disappears and he leaves behind this destruction. Okay, Varan, I don't know how far off Myron Healy's camp is from the lake, but it can't be too far because he's conducting experiments there, I would think. Yet at this point, they've already called in the military to extract the locals, and there's a lot of military surrounding this lake. And it's almost as if the Japanese government has already experienced a giant monster attack in Godzilla. And they're like, we're not taking this crap anymore. So they immediately, even before, it's just a rumor. We had to say, why is there so much military coming in? Because it's a rumor that there's a giant monster at the bottom of this lake. Hasn't even appeared. But what I was going on about is he does appear.
Yeah, this movie's shit, Drew. It's okay. You can see.
He appears, though, Joe, and he disappears. Like, they hear his first footstep, landfall, and it's like, poof, everything shakes, and they're like, what was that? And then nothing else happens, although he does walk across land, and for some reason, his first step is the only step that, like, is earthquakey. And then a man dies of fright. You remember that? The guard dies of fright. And then he disappears back into the water.
That's one of the better parts of the movie.
Yeah, it's building up the suspense, which is, yes, an actual good element of this film, of which there are very few. And then Varan is gone. And it's like this mystery, because, I mean, they've been talking about Varan, Obaki, but there hasn't been any appearances of him. So it's that element of they're baiting you. They're like teasing you with the monster. I don't think it shows him at that point. It might show him like slightly, and then he goes back into the water, and you don't know when he's going to come back. So the tension's there. The audience at that point actually knows more than the characters in the film.
The entire time, I am questioning, okay, did the anti-salinization thing, is that what pissed him off to come to shore? And honestly, I still don't know.
What it could have been as well, yes, because, okay, what is Varan? Joe, because there's... like what type of a creature Varan is what I'm saying. He
looks like a dinosaur, frankly.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks like a goofy dinosaur.
Unlike, you got to think, unlike Gojira is not only this ancient being, but Gojira's origins, he's somehow mutated or at least awoken by atomic energy, right? So that's what makes him large. He has like an atomic breath and everything.
Right.
He's an ancient species of something that escaped extinction by being at the bottom of the ocean.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So this one, though, this was a rumored monster on the island, at least in this version.
Yes.
This was a rumored monster on the island already.
And there would have been nothing to transform him, though, Joe. He's just,
right.
It's like the ancient species that he originates
It's not like
from
suddenly
is that large.
a gigantic fish like, bloop,
Yeah.
like goes to the top of the water and he's like, oh, this is like making things huge in the water.
Yeah, one of the closest well-known myths
must
to
be
compare this to be
a real animal in quotes, or like a mythic animal that he's
yes,
fighting.
to compare this to something that a lot of people would know about would be like, well, see, the water's blowing. This is the mysterious first appearance of Varan. His quick on the land, kill somebody with fright and go back in the water. But the best comparison that would be widely known that you could think about what Varan is like, it would be like the Loch Ness Monster, I would say, actually, because he is large. And yet
definitely.
he's not anything like a large ancient species that escaped extinction and yet had not been modified, enlarged, given fantastic abilities like Godzilla's atomic breath in any way. He just originally was that large. And honestly, for Varan, he's huge. Like Godzilla, it kind of makes it, none of this is believable, but it makes it more less of a stretch, I suppose, to think he's huge. Well, atomic energy aided in that process. You have Varan, I guess, brontosauruses, isn't that the really long-necked dinosaurs, the brontosaurus? They were huge.
I think actually Brontosaurus is not a real dinosaur.
No.
I think it's like
I'm just trying to think of an ancient
Brachiosaurus
species.
or Diplodocus. Gosh, you're bringing me back to 11 years old, Drew.
20, 24, 25.
No, I believe.
I
mean, this isn't a bad tangent. Brontosaurus, I believe, was two different types of dinosaurs. They put the wrong head on the wrong neck.
Oh.
And they called it Brontosaurus, and it turned out to be two different dinosaurs.
No.
It was one of the long-necked dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It was like two different ones, but they were different species.
Well, what Varan is, though, it says...
But yet it was a super popular species, so everybody knows what Brontosaurus is.
Yeah, well, I mean, popularized, of course, by Jurassic Park, the movie. Varan's name likely comes from either the scientific genus name Varanus, commonly known as the monitor lizard. He does look very lizard-like, much more than Godzilla, or the extinct synapsid family Varanopidae. So, giant lizard is what he's based off of. And also, Joe, what you have to say is for the basis of these films and possibly why this one's not so good and why others may have held up better or originally in screenplay, why they had much more of a stronger base is that Gojira, we've went over this in that episode, was based on the Lucky Dragon tragic incident of being, over miscalculation of the atomic bomb and blah, blah, blah. And that's what your film based around, an actual event. Mm-hmm. Then you have Rodan based around the event of, it's a story, like a U.S. pilot, and he thought he saw like a flying something like a UFO, and right. I think he either disappeared or just nobody ever believed him. Something happened. And so it's like a real life event. This is just, I don't know that there was much of a story going into this. This is just generic monster movie. That's actually one of the largest complaints from the kaiju fandom, the fans of giant monsters, about this film, saying that, its reception is, people have accused this movie of copying the strategy used in Godzilla King of the Monsters, but executing it much less effectively. It's just much more generic monster movie story, and other Toho kaiju films, they involve more complex and interesting stories, as I've already went over. Mm-hmm. So I was just barely listening to, I believe it was a podcast where an actor was saying that it was Bruce Campbell's AMA, and he was saying that the screenplay of a film is your backbone of the film, and really an actor or producer, anyone involved in the movie process, can tell before the movie's produced how strong the movie's going to be based on the screenplay, due to the fact Bruce Campbell compared it to the structure of the film, like the blueprint for it. As in, if you were building a house and the blueprints are off, you're going to have a structure that's a little skewed. And that's going to, I just don't see how any of these productions were that strong. Any three, and we only know this one, but honestly, Joe, I don't want to burst your bubble here, but the Japanese version apparently isn't that highly regarded either. Certainly more than this, but not that highly regarded amongst giant monster fans.
I'm excited to get to it. I do want to say...
I am as well.
I do have a correction here. So Brontosaurus is apparently something real now, but it is contested whether or not it's just a different type of... Yeah, because I was like, well, I better make sure that my 11-year-old self was right, which he was sort of half right. Apatosaurus, they're saying that it's possibly... Brontosaurus is just a type of, like, Apatosaurus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what's contested. I'm going to find out what dinosaur I'm thinking of later. Yeah, or if someone knows, they can correct me.
Thank you, Joe.
So this guy, what do you think of the lead of this movie? Our American lead, Myron Healy.
I've definitely voiced my opinion on him that he's definitely less strong an actor than Raymond Burr. Because the movie, because of the way the story's structured, this is the way it's been changed, is to focus solely around a single person, that person being an actor that's not that charismatic. Myron Healy, up to this point, I believe Joe will go into this, is pretty much been a prolific bit actor.
He's what you would call a character actor.
Yeah.
Only he seems
Mostly
to play very straight white men. So maybe it's slightly different. Yeah, bit parts, small parts. He was born on June 8th, 1923 in California, and he died at age 82 in 2005, December 21st, 2005. He was an actor / military. He had a whole long career in the Army Reserves. And he was actually very prolific on television.
Oh, yeah. Mostly in Westerns, it appears.
Yeah, mostly in Westerns. He, you might recognize these. Daniel Boone, Bonanza, Gunsmoke. He had roles in all those. The Adventures of Rin Tin Tin.
Bonanza.
Maverick. He was even in some non-Westerns such as The Adventures of Superman and Perry Mason, believe it or not.
The two that I'm seeing, the Three Stooges and the Alfred Hitchcock Hour.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
The Alfred Hitchcock Hour was somewhat akin to like Twilight Zone.
And he did appear in some movies. I think besides, of course, this kaiju classic, he also appeared in Rio Bravo and True Grit. He was one of the guys in that movie.
As far as my interests go, film-wise, which is what we're talking about, because this is what he did for a career. What else did he do, Joe? It said he was in the Army. He was in, I believe he's in World War II, and then he was a career Army man after that. I think he was in the Air Force, but let me double check. How easy would that have been for him to act as a military officer on film? I mean, he really had been. It said that he participated in bombings during that would have been World War II.
So he's part of the Air Corps Navigator and Bombardier flying B-26 Martin Marauders in Europe after the war. I don't know what that is. Sorry, guys.
We're reading off facts.
After the war, he continued his military duties and he retired in the 1960s as a captain. So he was in the Army Reserves or the Air Force Reserves. Sorry,
at this point,
the Air Force Reserves all during this. So part-time actor, part-time
professional
military. There you go.
The two movies, not of note, but really the only two horror films that he appeared in were Varan the Unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I just keep saying that film title, and I can't believe that's the actual film title. I just got to mention, because we're going to get into it, the Japanese film title translated, of course, is Giant Monster Varan. Really not much better, but at least more straightforward.
Yeah.
And the other horror film that he was in, and this is many years later, 1977, was The Incredible Melting Man. I don't know if he was a lead in that, but it's like he was in Westerns. Last two films of his career, it appears, or at least his swan songs were horror films at the end there.
It's kind of funny to me that both him and Raymond Burr have a connection through Perry Mason.
Oh, that's true.
And through Toho monster movies that played on TV a lot. Of course, this one was strictly television, and at least there was some theatrical release with the Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Yes.
What do you think of the Varan suit?
Well, right off the bat here, we're seeing
This is
these
one of the best
low-
scenes, by the way.
We're seeing yes, because and why is it one of the best scenes? Because they're using footage from the
there's
Japanese.
action
Yeah.
and stuff.
They're using footage from the Japanese version. Okay, that low angle shot doesn't work at all for Varan though, because it's very clear, painstakingly clear that the actor has a mask on because of the neckline from the suit. It's not only baggy, but you can just see where the mask over his neck separates from the suit. No amount of black and white or grainy footage can hide that detail from the audience. And really, it appears that there are a lot more parts to this suit. I'm not saying that his face doesn't look good, because Varan's face looks pretty cool, especially straight on. And that's, at least for Godzilla early on, when you're looking at him straight on, he usually looks worse. And that in profile or kind of slightly angled towards the camera, Godzilla looks better. You know what? Just, that's about the only thing I can say.
We thought it was
for
two
Varan.
different monsters for a second. We're like, what the heck is going on?
Oh, yeah. It's just that there's very distinct separate parts you can see on Varan's suit, because the back, it almost appears like a shell thing, but it's definitely not. It's just the lizard's back. But there's like a distinct line where the back of the suit comes out from the front. So I made the comments, you were watching it. It looks like a mid to high end-ish, like Halloween costume. It's definitely not Toho's best effort.
No, it's not. And this was obviously, a kind of rushed and troubled production. It seems
on
to
many
me.
aspects.
It does have the A-list, though. It is Inishiro Honda. It is.
Oh,
I just said Inishiro. Gosh dang it! It's
You've fallen.
Ishiro Honda.
You've fallen for these American credits. Always
boy.
calling him Inoshiro.
Yeah, don't remind me.
Sorry, dude.
Ishiro Honda. Akira Ifukube did the music for the original version. All, of course, has been replaced in this version. And Eiji Tsuburaya did the effects.
And Haruo Nakajima was Varan, at least early on. I don't know if they would have shot the monster scenes in sequence, but at some point, really, I think it would have been during the final sequence, attacking Tokyo, because early on, Joe, they do an interesting effect with the very first military attack against Varan, just as he's coming out of the lake. There's like an overlay over the film where the explosions are taking place. They're not actual explosions around the suit actor going off. They're just kind of, they can be like appearing in front of his face, like smoke and explosions, because it's not in the same, it's a film, it's a special effect. And yet later on, during the attack on Tokyo, they are actual explosions around the actor. Apparently, one of those explosions went off too close to Haruo Nakajima, injuring his wrist. And so he ended up not, for at least some of this, not being in the suit. So someone else took over. And who knows, that could have aided in the, in why Varan just doesn't go down as much of a monster here, because
I think it's the suit. I just don't think the suit looks good.
well, that, and Joe, Is
I think it looks kind of
Varan
dopey.
Bipedal or quadrupedal? Does he walk on two legs or four?
I don't know. When you're going up some really steep stairs, Drew, and you're in a hurry, do you walk on 2 feet or 4?
2.
Think about when you were a kid.
So when I was a small child, for like a small percentage of my entire lifespan, 2.
Honestly, there's a stairway in my old house that I don't know. I would have to think really hard if I walk up them, or if I
Are we comparing
I just
a
go
giant,
straight up on all fours, just
a giant species of nearly extinct monsters, dinosaurs, to children, their behavior? But anyway, he comes out of the lake, bipedal, starts crushing this village.
Gosh, his eyes are
big
dopey.
Eyes, he has big eyes. He starts crushing the village with 4 limbs. He's walking on all 4s. And something about Varan, at least that we see in this film, in the American version, he would be a diphibian. That would be because he is both an underwater monster, a dinosaur, whatever, and also a land animal. In the Japanese version, Joe, he's a triphibian. Do you know why? Because he flies, he walks on land, and what was that?
it was just a gesture that maybe we shouldn't share on this family podcast.
But he goes.
I was wondering, triphibian.
Hair. This is all the research, dude. He flies. He walks on land, and he can swim. He can exist underwater. That's where his natural habitat is, it seems. Okay, at least in the facts, he's clocked in at gliding at 1.5 like Mach speed, just the same as Rodan, gliding. So no propulsion. That's a legit speed to reach by just catching some air and floating along, especially for a creature of that size. And yet, Joe, did you remember any flying in this film? Because I was looking out for it, but I didn't.
Besides the balloons that try to hit him, no, not really.
He doesn't fly. So they cut out all of the flying that Varan does on film for the American version because they wanted to make him more believable for American audiences.
So the corporation that ruined this movie, not that it didn't already have problems, but this is awful.
Adding to the pile.
This is an hour and 7 minutes of wasted time is what it is. So at least you get to hear our beautiful voices while you watch along with us. So Crown International Pictures was the company. They were founded in 1959 by a dude named Newton P. Jacobs, who was apparently working at RKO Pictures until 1947 when he formed Favorite Pictures, which was basically an organization to, take a lot of international pictures, take a lot of B movies, biker films and stuff like that, exploitation films, and release those. So they were, and I say were, I actually think they're still around. Apparently
Really?
his son owns Louis Jacob owns the company, and they were formed in, he got it in 1988 when Newton Jacobs died.
Okay.
Anyway, so here's a list of some movies, and I'll be honest, I haven't heard any of these, but Orgy of the Dead, 1965.
Ooh, it sounds like it
Great
belongs
film.
in the Romero Dead series.
Mm-hmm. We got Wild Rebels, Blood of Dracula's Castle.
Joe, you mentioned that these are exploitation films. That's all I'm
Exploitation,
catching
B
from
horror. They took actually a few international pictures and redubbed them and stuff like that.
We got to say really.
Sextet from 1976.
I got to say really quick before you go on. Apparently, Varan is attracted to lights, much like Godzilla.
Much like Godzilla.
Yes. Bright lights piss him off.
In Gigantus the Fire Monster.
Yeah.
Malibu High. Budo, The Art of Killing the Beach Girls. Hunk from 1984.
The sequel or prequel to Them.
The Virgin Queen of St. Francis High from 1987. That must be interesting.
Wow. What a
Jocks
title.
from 1987. My Mom's a Werewolf from 1989, and the most recent movie put out by Crown Crown International Pictures was Malibu Spring Break.
What year was that?
2003.
Okay, so they may be defunct at this point if their last production was 2003, but
They got a bunch of television
well,
stuff.
but they span from the 60s to early 2000s. That's
And
quite a
something that's
run.
noticeable, apparently a lot of their movies have been shown through Mystery Science 3 Theater 3000. I wonder why.
I don't believe that Varan has gotten that treatment, at least not through any of the sources that I was going through. Did I see that? But perhaps the Japanese version. We're going to get to, Joe, post Destroy All Monsters, and perhaps they did do Destroy All Monsters. We're going to get to a few Godzilla films that have gotten the Mystery Science Theater 3000 treatment, which, if you're not familiar, it's a great comedy show about being up in space with some robots and a human who just talk over a film. And you'd think, okay, what's the charm in that? They're hilarious.
It's improv and
Yeah.
it's really funny, but
They're way good.
unfortunately we're not as funny as them. So you'll have an extra not funny podcast to go along with the same movie.
We provide the facts and a few opinions, light on the opinions.
There you go.
But Varan. So here's something else, Joe. Varan's roar was actually very popular. They reused it later for Gorosaurus, Megalon, and the Showa era Baragon. Which, interestingly enough, we're going to get to that when we watch Frankenstein Conquers the World. His roar was apparently changed for this American version from the Japanese one. But what I remember of his roar here, it sounds exactly like the first half of Godzilla's roar, minus the ending, like you know how it ends.
Yeah, the
it's
weird
like
part. Yeah.
It's a build up and then the very weird ending. So it's the build up and then it cuts off, and then that's his whole roar is just a beginning.
I found his roar kind of lackluster, frankly, and unmemorable.
Yes. Speaking of sounds in this
generic
film,
monster roar.
speaking of all the forgettable sounds in this film, Ifukube's score for the American version was pretty much cut out completely, and yet I guess it says cut out completely in some sources, and others it says mostly, and yet there is a small nod or like a small distinct something which you can hear in, at least even in the American version, but definitely in the Japanese, that sounds very similar to Rodin's theme, apparently. When you have Ifukube, we've mentioned this so many times. When you have Ifukube scoring a monster film, it raises the stakes. It raises the grandness of the film.
It's very dramatic.
Yeah. It lends a lot more gravity to, I mean, we're watching suit actors jumping around and doing this stuff, but it feels more real. It feels like it's got higher stakes, and that there's more, there's a word that I'm fishing for here, but it's like legitimacy to the giant monster horror.
Oh, yeah, it grounds it.
Yep,
almost.
That's definitely what I was going for, was the grounding of it. And not that...
grounds it in some sort of emotional reality.
Yeah. Well, at least a cinematic emotional reality, since we're used to hearing that.
It feels important.
Yeah, that's perfect, yes. And
you'll watch a dopey monster suit, but because the music is so powerful, you go, this is great.
Yeah, you're not...
Yeah.
Not annoyed.
But this, of course, just like Gigantus the Fire Monster, the soundtrack has been replaced with generic B-movie score and not even a memorable B-movie score.
No, I'm sure they just had a rotating soundtrack. I'm sure they had soundtracks for, this is this type of a scene. Let's use this that we've used in several other films. But
my assumption, of course, Drew, is that they had to, I'm not sure if they had to replace all the sound themselves, but certainly when you take the music out of the picture, maybe they didn't have. I wonder with these movies, because I don't know, and it's just speculation. I wonder if they didn't have the wonderful original score, like if they didn't have the full access to just that sound in order to add it within their cut, within their mix. And that they had to fill it with whatever they could get a hold of through.
Well, honestly, when you think about it, if it wasn't the same, it wasn't the American production company that bailed on them in the first place, and yet if I were Toho and had been like screwed over, for lack of a better, that's exactly what happened. Just got screwed over. They produced a film and then they backed out of it. The American company. It wasn't the same one that came in. It was a different one to come in and salvage, make an American version of this. Yet I still would have, having been soured on an American company relationship. It's a wonder that Tanaka, I always get the two mixed up, the producer Tanaka of all these monster films that Toho did in this era and going on to the next era, still wanted later on, after even an experience like this, to work with American companies and hire American actors. Luckily, that man had a vision that there could be these productions on such a scale of really just these different countries coming together. And so you could make money more around the world by making them appeal to both audiences in Japan and America. I would have been reluctant, to say the least, if I were Toho, to give them this full score of the original. The one that they ended up releasing in theaters in Japan.
Well, I'm just thinking, as a distributor, you go, wow, the music in that original movie was really great. I don't know anybody who thinks that the Fukube scores suck, frankly.
Who knows? They may have found them great, and yet as a producer, I can see that they would think, yeah, but it doesn't fit what our
It doesn't fit our
does.
cut. Yeah, maybe.
Because they just have, honestly,
just throw it in there. Just throw whatever sticks.
I don't want to say it's a positive, but it is actually that they use the same scores, because it makes it so that the audience is made more aware, even on a subconscious level, of what scenes are going to be about, like what the mood is being conveyed. If you've watched several films that are all just in the horror genre, even if they're in different subgenres like giant monster, science fiction, or like a actual fantasy, like mythical, like Dracula, something like that, and yet they all share the same not soundtracks completely, yet some music for certain types of scenes, because then your audience is cued in already, and again, maybe even on only a subconscious level, of what's coming next. So you can almost focus more on what's going to be actually happening on the screen. Yeah, as the subtitles here, Joe, we get foreign language.
Yeah, that's fine. We had the same thing in Godzilla King of the Monsters. Whenever there were Japanese people, they would actually speak Japanese And of course it worked because in that movie we had the one character who wasn't Japanese and everything had to be translated for him.
True, and yet at the same time I don't remember it going on for this long, possibly only because it feels longer in this because it's worse. It's worse.
That in our American plotline, our Western man, our Western hero has been taken. He was put into the movie, and then in the parts where he doesn't fit, and they couldn't figure out a way to write him into like the plane cockpit or whatever. In those moments, it's like, okay, well now we're with the Japanese movie because
there's no way we can cut him in with this.
He has absolutely no He has no purpose already. I mean, unless he is the one who, in fact, woke up the monster. On top of that, though, like the Japanese military saves the day, and he just sits there.
And why does he sit there? He has this plan. He's all, I have a whole storage facility, a whole bunker, possibly whatever, of this desalinating chemical that we can make more potent, like put it into projectiles, basically bombing him with this desalinization
take the salt
stuff.
right out of him.
Yeah, he just thinks he knows that it's that toxic already, that it's going to be able to take out the creature. He just barely met the creature, and yet he thinks he knows the composition of the creature well enough to know what's going to take him out. Interesting. This is a really interesting sequence, Joe, where he's under the water, and he's like hiding behind a rock. I don't get the purpose of why Varan underwater hiding behind a rock hiding from explosions that are coming down, raining down on him from ships. Maybe he's using the rock as cover, and yet what it appears to be is that a lot of these explosions are hitting him directly on anyway. It makes for an interesting shot every time it cuts from explosion above the water or Japanese military shooting bombs onto the water from their ship. And then the interesting shot is Varan's face below the water as he's looking behind him, the rock that's protecting him, because he's just kind of center frame, and behind him you see most of the ocean, and there's all these explosions going on. That shot, though, because you're just shown the monster so much, and unlike what they did with Godzilla, I'm pretty sure intentionally, but I can't be 100% sure, in his first film, he's looking down. And that adds a lot of like menace to Godzilla, that he's looking down on people and just destroying them. Varan's just looking forward. The most that I can say about at least what's kept in the American version with Varan's parts, the like most intense, I guess you could say, destruction he causes is as he's running through on all fours that village, and he's just, because he doesn't have any powers. He just is like Anguirus, and yet he's the center of the movie monster. He's the only monster in the film.
He's a lot like Anguirus.
Yeah, but he just runs through at high speeds through the village.
He scares people to death. That's cool.
Yeah, very early on. And silently as well. He creeps up. One giant earthquake step, and then he realizes, because he's intelligent enough to realize that people are going to hear that, and that he's surrounded. Because like you pointed it out, Joe, as his second appearance on land from the lake, they are just cocked and ready. The military is standing by with their guns loaded, and they are unleashing hell on this monster just as he pokes his head out of the water, and then he goes back in and comes out after a minute. But you're like, so are they just sitting there with their guns loaded, just waiting, even though it's not even been confirmed that the monster is there and then he emerged? I don't know. I don't think that they found his footprint from his first sneaky escape out of the water and then slipping back into the water. But I really had a hunch that that's what was going to happen, because that's what happens in the first Godzilla movie. Even though he escaped, and they're suspect that there is a giant monster due to I guess this movie bears so many similarities to Godzilla.
It does.
That there's the villagers that have an ancient legend among them that say that there's a monster. Oh, yeah. Whatever, the Godzilla one's true as well.
Well, I think they call him what the villagers called the monster that they knew about.
Wouldn't you say,
I don't
Joe,
think they were actually the same thing.
Isn't that just such a great marketing idea, having one name for the monster throughout the whole thing?
Oh.
Not because I actually think there's even three, because the villagers call him something else, and then Myron Healy's character keeps calling him Obaki, and then we get the accidental calling him what the title is actually. Joe, it's not as menacing that Varan's coming on land here, and it's not only...
And it ends really quickly as well.
Yeah,
it's like,
they much shortened.
Look, he just kind of sits there, and then we throw some balloons at him. So I got the director. I found the director who directed the American recut scenes in here.
Okay.
His name is Jerry A. Bearowitz. And here's the thing. He only has 3 directing credits on IMDb.
Yeah.
He did 3 episodes of the television show The Texan in 1960. He did it looks like a made-for-TV movie called Wild Harvest in 1962. And then Varan the Unbelievable, of course, the scenes in here from 1962. But it looks like he actually is... he seemed to have quite a career in here. He was as a producer on television movies and television shows.
So he didn't screw up his career enough from this, or was this post or pre this movie?
He was an associate producer on Fright Night.
And do you know that? Oh, so that was much later. Fright Night.
And that was 1985.
I was going to say 80s.
He was co-producer for something called Stewardess School. Armed and Dangerous in 1986. He was associate producer. He was an associate producer for Punchline in 1988.
Well, managed to stick around in Hollywood even after.
Yeah, he's a behind the scenes sort of guy. He's working to get these movies made. Now these are mostly television movies that don't have too much clout, except for maybe Fright Night.
Yeah, because that's one that I actually recognize.
Yeah, we got one called Mr. Jones, which looks like a legit movie, which I've never heard of. And his last credit that I see is The Nephew from 1998.
As long as we're talking about credits for these people behind the scenes.
He had a full career.
I gotta say, for Myron Healy, if this doesn't sum up the man, Myron Healy, and you know what? We keep saying it, and upon very first hearing his name, I thought that I had known him more from stuff, and yet I didn't. The name just sounds very like, oh yeah, that sounds like an old...
It sounds very middle ground, if that's what you're saying.
Well, it sounds like the name of an actor that you would know from these old films. So Myron Healy.
Sounds like Marlon Brando.
Yeah, it's true. But anyway, in
Myron
2000...
Healy, Marlon Brando. I don't know. I bet I could get those mixed up.
In 2000,
not really.
Myron Healy won a Golden Boot Award, and the award was the Backbone of the Bees Award. If that doesn't sum up this man, I'm winning an award called the Backbone of the Bees.
Well, I assume the boot was something to do with his westerns that he did.
Yeah, and really just as I don't know what that award program is or what the award is, but being a backbone of the Bees, as in B movies, he really did. And it said in there somewhere around in his credits that he had like 140 bit acting parts to his name, mostly again in westerns. So he was for many years a very prolific actor, and really he was a backbone. Again, maybe one of the reasons why he's not so great as a lead here. And also mostly he was a bad guy. Mostly he was a bad guy.
This is also frankly just a bad movie, and so when you got a person in a bad movie, they look bad. That's what happens. True Grit is a great film. It's got John Wayne in it. He's great in that movie. He actually won an Oscar for it, which he totally didn't deserve for that movie. But I think John Wayne deserved an Oscar for The Searchers, and they just gave him an Oscar later because they're like, well, you deserve one this year, which they often do. But it's a movie that's a lot of great fun in it, and I don't know what part this guy plays in it. I have no idea because I can't remember seeing his face before.
Going along with what he's done,
he must have been one of the cowboys in the baddie group. That's what I assume.
With his quotes, I guess this is what they would have called.
But that's a great movie, and so he didn't pull that movie down. That's what I'm saying.
Oh no.
This is just bad. This is just a bad movie.
He's mostly bad guys. He said you can put a lot of expression in being a bad guy. There's more like range you could do. That's a quote from him. So who knows?
Oh, really?
As a good guy, he just didn't see that there was as much.
Because you're being a good guy.
You're just good, and that's very like.
Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah,
that is a very good point.
All right, Joe, I gotta say, because we've yet to even mention Varan's like features on his back, like what he's got the spines.
He looks like Anguirus.
Yeah, he's got
he looks like Anguirus, except he's only like his spikes are.
He's got one row of like spikes, and they're not They're not Godzilla-like spikes. I mean, they go up on top of his head.
It looks like a mix between Anguirus and Godzilla.
Yeah, yeah.
That?
He looks more like a... Forever ago on the forums, we had this discussion of what giant monsters would be considered real monsters, in quotes, and one which are like more mutated. Both sides of the spectrum, like far on one end, real monsters would be King Kong. He's just a big ape. And then on the other end would probably be like Gigan, I would say. Something that's very much like a mechanized creature, I guess Mechagodzilla, but like not a real monster, a created monster. But some of his features would be like, okay, his abilities. He has these giant bubbles you can kind of see along the suit, not so much here because it's so dark in this final scene. And yet, all right, his skin's covered with huge blisters or lumps. In amphibians, if he is an amphibian, such blisters contain poison glands, but in reptiles, lumps like these are usually osteoderms. They're armor plates. And likely what people have been led to speculate is that they're the latter, due to the fact that he's able to withstand so much military firepower. So he's got like plating due to these giant glands on him. He's got the spikes, and he's got what we're going to see in the next one, his membranes underneath his arms that allow him to fly at speeds like Rodan. Making him known in many publications as the flying squirrel monster.
That's hilarious.
Just due to, even though he's definitely not a flying squirrel.
I'm excited to see that.
Just due to the fact that he's got the membranes, and really that's the only real life creature that seems to be able to glide in that fashion is a flying squirrel.
You know, watching these two different directors, there's definitely a difference in quality. Not just the film stock, which is very different. The Japanese,
much darker in the Japanese
film. It's little it's a little underlit, and that could have just been the transfer of the film. But
very likely.
On top of that, it's just Ishiro Honda. It's much more. I would say the frames are much more interesting, even though they're cropped like crazy. But the frames are much more interesting. What's going on is much more interesting, and the what we see with the American footage, besides being, of course, spliced together in this weird, crazy way, like we talked about it at the beginning, it's just lit very blandly.
Yeah. There's
it's staged very
special focus
blandly.
On lighting. It's just let's light it. It's got to have enough light.
And
I really hope for these scenes and throughout the Japanese version, I hope it's a lot brighter because it takes out much of the detail. Oh, Serizawa's there.
Oh, yeah. He was totally there.
Yeah, so
that's crazy.
It's good that he's going to have a part in this.
I think I saw him the first time. I totally forgot that he was in here, though.
It's just weird, Joe. As already mentioned, going from color Rodan to this one, I really don't... There would have been, in my mind, no way that Toho would have went back and made a
Toho,
black and white
They just had to deal
movie.
with the company, and they were making the movie for him.
I don't think...
That's
and you know what?
The
other reason...
And then they had to salvage it.
That they would have gotten screwed over, really, on that deal. That the deal, as the deal soured, that the loss of the American company and just saying, no, we don't want it anymore, even though they finished production on it. I don't think that Toho would have gotten compensation, only due to the fact that they did decide to use the footage and make a film out of it, because it's like, oh, we got to recoup our losses. That's pure speculation, but likely. And here is about the only time we have any sort of a...
this is the hero of the movie right at the end. Just
the man who's mentioned by name. I wish we would have gotten the quote because it's so terrible. When Myron Healy's character is mentioning these main characters that are just kind of shoved in like crowbarred into the American version, who are the main leads in the Japanese, and gives them the weird names. He says a very strange thing, like they're known throughout Japan as anytime there's a news report, Taki and Chun, or whatever their weird names are there. And I'm like, really? He just seems, his character in the show, in the movie, seems like a delusional man. He seems like somebody who just, because his introduction, he's dictating to his wife this letter, and she's just very, wife-like, as especially in the 60s, under the boot of the man.
Well, I mean, that's the way it should be.
Joe, don't make listeners not like it.
Oh, it's a joke. Jeez.
Yes, I just had to clarify that. But for perhaps new listeners. We're not used to Joe's brand of humor. But that he's just dictating to his wife something that doesn't seem that important and to send off. And she's just all too happy to help him throughout all this. We also didn't mention, Joe, the scene where he's jumped by, I'm assuming, a villager, someone who's distraught at being kicked off their land by him. He's intervening with the Japanese government to get him, to get all the villagers just
the one
evacuated.
Guy jumping, and then the wife comes out, the other guy runs off.
Smiling.
And then they're like, they act as if nothing happened. Yeah, that scene, that was terrible.
Within the same sequence of him just
kind
of at dusk, walking around, smoking a cigarette, which he is very often in this film. Not even for a film of this era is it usually that prominent, and yet smoking. And yet he's jumped by the man. He defeats him with a blanket. Like, there's absolutely no... Joe, I just barely watched of the lowest tier movies in that 50-pack collection. I've watched about a dozen so far, and I didn't think it could get much worse compared to some that I've seen.
Sure.
You should look up Beast from Yucca Flats. It's, Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Beast from anything is probably not that great. Maybe Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, because it made Godzilla, but I haven't seen it.
There's a fight scene in that, and here the movie's ending, so we're done. Thank goodness with this. Myron Healy did nothing in the end.
No, he just sat around.
Nope, he was fixing his radio.
You know what?
And
there's a Salt Lake in Southern California. I'm going to go over there, try the experiment again, and hopefully don't wake up anything scary this time.
Not necessarily Salt Lake, but a Salt Lake in the US.
I said a Salt Lake, yeah.
When you say Salt Lake,
Yeah.
But, okay. Beast from Yucca Flats. There's a fight scene in that because of the premise of the whole film. It's absolutely terrible. It's in, it received like a 2. I want to say about a 2.3 or like 2.6 out of 10 on IMDb. And it's in IMDb, in its Internet Movie Database's lowest 100 rated films. It's like 36. Your comments are much appreciated. How it ends now.
This has like a 5.1 on IMDb, which is pretty low for IMDb.
It's actually lower than Son of Godzilla, which received like a 6 something. So yes, do you think that's low?
I believe that.
Beast of Yucca Flats 2.3 or 0.6, very low. It's like 36 on their lowest 100 rated. So like going from best to worst would be number 1. It's 36. There's a fight scene in that with I mentioned Plan 9 from Outer Space because it's a well known for being
notoriously
horrible
bad film.
Ed Wood film, from an old black and white film. Makes no sense, plot line, things that happen in the film, not even just dialogue or plot line. And yet, as certain actor Tor Johnson, he was a wrestler turned actor. He's a very big man. He's the bald one that's the zombie. He's got like the contacts in that you can't see his pupils, but
sure.
Yeah, anyway. Tor Johnson is the Beast of Yucca Flats. And there's that fight scene in the movie that happens where after he's become irradiated, he's a beast. And really, it's just him with some burn makeup on and torn clothing. But really, he's just a big man. Not even bulky, muscly. He's just large, fat. And he's this man wandering around in the desert, slowly killing people. Oh, it's terrible. It's a terrible movie. But the big fight scene right before he's killed at the end of the film is he's wrestling on the ground. Wrestling in quotes with one of the 2 cops that have been trailing these killings, and then they find out near the end that it was this beast, which is really just a burn man who's went crazy living in caves. He's wrestling on the ground. You can tell Tor Johnson's a very old, decrepit man, can't really grapple, and he's kind of got him by the throat, and it really takes some acting in order to make it look suspenseful that he's doing anything to the actor. Like the bad guy's killing him.
Right.
And the other cop just pulls out his gun and shoots the beast in the back, and it's done. And I was like, oh, that was bad. That was terrible. It's even worse in this, that fight where he just throws a blanket on the villager who jumps him, and the villager just kind of rolls away with the blanket on him. Not even defeated, just kind of, I'm not supposed to be in the scene anymore.
Well, thank goodness this movie is shorter than Gigantus the Fire Monster.
How long? It was an hour and 7 minutes.
Hour and 7 minutes, yes.
That's one of the only positive notes on this film is that if you're going to watch it, which we recommend you don't.
Should have time.
It doesn't take that long to watch.
So that's it for our commentary. Drew, are there your final thoughts on this movie before we take care of some business?
So, well, yours were that you think it's worse than Gigantus the Fire Monster?
I think it is worse than Gigantus the Fire Monster. It is, in the version that we see at least, it is unwatchable due to all the weird cuts. Gigantus the Fire Monster is visually watchable while being terrible.
And also, do you think because there's a
You don't want to look away from the screen just because it looks so bad.
Yeah. There's a weird thing that happens when a movie is so bad that it becomes almost good, as in it's entertaining to watch. Have you seen Troll 2?
No.
Okay.
I've watched the documentary about it.
All right. Well, these movies that get so bad, it almost
so
turns them.
Good, yeah.
Yes, it almost turns them into an enjoyable watch, something you want to show to your friends because you're like, let's watch a bad movie and have fun. This movie doesn't get that far into it. It really is just bad. And so
I think Son of Godzilla's in there.
It's up there. Yeah,
where it's enjoyable.
Almost one of those. I showed it to my friend.
That turd is just. Ugh.
I showed it to my friend and we enjoyed it. Watched it with our commentary. But yeah, Joe, I'm gonna have to agree with you. It's lower.
Look at that.
It's lower than the Fire Monster because
so we hit a kaiju movie that is worse.
I didn't think we would, but as far as entertainment, actually, like entertainment wise, it doesn't reach that so bad it's good. And yet, Gigantus the Fire Monster, it doesn't. And yet, Gigantus the Fire Monster has features of it that you can like watch with your friend and go, "Isn't this so terrible?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, that's terrible," and you can agree, and it's an enjoyable experience. This one,
they're both pretty bad.
There's not even much to comment on because there's not much going on in the film.
Anyway,
so Joe,
I agree.
We had a contest.
Terrible.
We had a contest that's done at this point.
We did have a contest that's done, and we got some new iTunes reviews in between.
Not any new. We read them last time.
Yeah, we read them last. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
So they were within the range of the contest. Anyway, we're still doing this, by the way. So, and we'll continue to have contests in the future. So please give us your iTunes reviews. We'll read them on the show. If you don't want to give an iTunes review, just give us an email.
Check out the contact page on thegodzillapodcast.com.
It's just godzillapodcast.com.
Okay.
Yeah, don't say the.
I was going to say, I thought that it would redirect them, but
it's godzillapodcast.com. You can use the contact page there if you wish to communicate with us that way. You can also tweet me at JosephGillier.
But anything submitted to the contact page as a review counts as an entry for any future contest and all iTunes reviews.
Yes.
We appreciate, of course, the iTunes reviews due to it bumps up the show. More people listen to it. We can contribute to this community, and I really got to say, because I've noticed it lately, especially with Shin Godzilla coming out, it's a great community to be a part of. People are, for the most part... It's a happy
community. I'll tell you what, when we put stuff on Reddit for this podcast, because, it's like, well, maybe a Reddit user will like a podcast.
Yeah.
So we put up these episodes on the Reddit, and then usually the response is good. Like, people like it, or they click through and go, oh, can I get this on iTunes and stuff like that? And it's nice.
Yes.
I tell you what.
It's a nice community.
I have put, because I got other shows, remember, there's Nude Clan, there's Ultimate Final Fantasy, the Ultimate Final Fantasy podcast.
Check those out, of course.
When you take something on one of those shows, the video game fan community seems to be this like
venomous, almost
filled with vitriol and hate.
Oh, your college educated vocabulary.
And so when you post something on Reddit, it is ripped apart, and maybe two people will be like, "Oh, I'll check it out." But the Godzilla community so far, I'm sure there's some sour grapes out there. So far, the Godzilla community is a very nice fan community to be a part of.
Yeah, and
maybe because it's older, I don't know.
And you know what? Well, maybe because it's more niche. I don't know. The people who love Godzilla seem to be kind people.
They do.
The people who have commented on podcasts of ours in the past where we made a slight mistake, and hopefully we'll correct those in the future on the podcast, not just as a reply to your comment. Have been very kind. They're like, we love it, and yet this is one thing that you did wrong, and we're totally open to that. Yeah, helps us out.
Yeah, I appreciate the good stuff. So
any feedback.
So Drew, who won it? Who won our iTunes review?
Someone who wrote super awesomely chill, happy Godzilla time show special podcast fun enjoyment. The comment, the review. This is an iTunes review again. Any reviews submitted also on the website.
As long as you haven't won before, it's all up for...
With any. No matter how old they are, they're all open for this. His review says, From someone who only recently became interested in kaiju films, I have to say that it was serendipitous to stumble upon, in quotes, this podcast. The hosts give a commentary on one Godzilla movie per episode and give their own perspectives and musings. It is fun to watch along and hear what the hosts think about each movie. This is a very chill podcast. I have to say we are. And we
are very chill.
And at least we're not on a couch anymore. And there is something about the subtle energy, because we don't have an overt energy. We have a subtle energy that
Drew have a subtle energy.
You're a little more boisterous.
Maybe.
That Drew and Joe bring to a discussion about giant monsters and destruction. Most excellent indeed. That sounds like something Bill and Ted would say. Most excellent. I couldn't recommend the show highly enough. Thank you. Thank you, Baindrum.
Baindrum, now I believe I know you from some other podcasts. He's a listener to my other stuff.
This is not rigged.
When he says stumble upon, that's in quotes. That's what that means. He's been a big part of a fan community for UFF podcast already.
Baindrum has won.
Baindrum has won the Japanese edition DVD from Sumo Gorilla, and he has also won the Blu-ray edition of King Kong Escapes. So, Baindrum,
congrats.
Enjoy your movies. And remember, guys, if you want to get a chance to win whatever we decide to put up for a contest next, probably be a Godzilla film or action figure of some kind, please be sure to leave an iTunes review or a comment on the webpage. I do have one more piece of business, Drew.
Joe?
And that has to do with the inevitable asking for money because of
Joe,
the podcast.
Dude, we're hitting our year mark here. We've been doing this almost a year.
Almost a year.
Like I said, we transitioned from a couch to this. Joe, do you want to describe, just for the listeners, because we're going to be asking for money here, what we've transferred to from the beginning? We started out on a couch.
We actually have the same equipment. So the only thing that's different is a couch. So I used to take the podcasting, I used to take this mixer, and I would take two microphones, and we'd hold
recorder,
the mics up. We would just put the thing in front of the television
on the coffee table.
We would turn the volume way down, and then we would sit back on the couch with our Shure SM58 microphones in our hands, and we would then just talk over the film.
So your arms holding up the mic.
What has changed is that Ultimate Final Fantasies community was nice enough to be giving us solid Patreon donations, and so we were able to build, and I say in quotes, a studio out of what we had. So we got this.
We got a nice table.
We got a nice table in here. We drilled some holes in it. We got all these microphones here.
Joe and I are able to sit on chairs and have our elbows up on a table. It's
exactly.
Wonderful.
It's connected to the computer in a good way. And so the only time we have a problem is if we have to watch something on Blu-ray, then we have to, of course, get the Blu-ray player over here because the computer can't play the Blu-ray player.
Hook up a PS3.
Exactly. Now, that's not really the cost of the show, but, thank you to the UFF listeners who were, of course, supporting us on Patreon that time. Now, our Godzilla podcast, and me and Caleb, who is part of the Geekdom Entertainment Network, we were talking about costs for the show. And, other shows, basically Ultimate Final Fantasy, the big show, has been carrying the other shows on its back.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do is have the other shows start paying their share of the costs for the network. And so from doing some math, Drew.
What we can say is burgeoning artists, which you really are as a podcaster, we're hoping for donations.
We have been hemorrhaging funds. Yes, and we are hoping for donations. So our podcast, as we have figured it out to be with the rest of the network, Godzilla Podcast, costs $32.08 per month to produce. Which, considering our audience, I think if everybody were to give us $1, we'd be well ahead of where we need to be.
Yeah, and what are their options?
Their options right now, they only have one option right now, and that is to go to GodzillaPodcast.com. There is an Amazon support link through there, and they can click through that, and anything that they buy through Amazon, we get a small kickback, and it doesn't cost them a thing. So
if Godzilla Podcast just happens to be your favoriteest podcast, you can either go through the
Amazon page
or
bookmark it.
Yes, exactly. What I was going to say is bookmark that as your Amazon link portal to go through to buy things off Amazon. If you have Amazon Prime, as I do, you're going to buy things because it's a 2-day shipping and it's free on most things. Mm-hmm. And you get a lot of steep discounts on things like video games. But yeah, just bookmark it so that it's simple. You don't even have to think about it after that, honestly.
So that is your thing for now, and me and Drew are going to be in discussions about making a Patreon page if you wish to support the Godzilla podcast.
Solely for the Godzilla podcast.
Once per episode. It'll be a low cost
whatever you
tiers.
want to contribute, yeah.
And we're going to figure stuff out. I don't know if we should offer, maybe we'll do a drawing every month for something.
Yeah, we're going to do incentives.
Dollar amount.
And I say, Joe, because I can help fund this. This is what I hope to fund, and we'll fund it through your donations as well. I don't think that will end the giveaways that we've done, and yet this would be in addition to.
This will be in addition.
For the Patreon supporters. Yeah. And so if it's a smaller pool, it's you have a higher chance of winning, and you'll be. Yeah. And for those people, because if it's a drawing, Joe, would you say that it's fair that they can win more than once, since it's going to be random?
It'll be random. Okay. It'll be just completely random. If we'll have a certain dollar amount that'll kind of cover it, and it'll be smart money, right?
And so again, your money comes to production of these shows, to research things. Like,
I don't know if maybe we should have bonus episodes at a certain dollar amount for Patreon exclusive stuff.
Joe, if it gets to a certain point, do you think we should do the TV show?
Oh no, that's a good point.
Because there's not only the Hanna-Barbera, which I was looking up slightly more about this Godzilla. Hanna-Barbera, of course, produced Scooby-Doo and many other television cartoon classics. Oh, wow, I sound like I'm announcing that, like I'm selling something. But Godzuki. We talked about Son of Godzilla, and yet Godzilla had a son in that, and he acts much like Scooby-Doo. That's what we'd be doing bonus episodes of. Yeah. Basically, his mannerisms are identical. Actually, no, I think they said Scrappy-Doo, which is much worse, but we'd find that out. And then also, if we ever got done with that, there's the
American one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, those are good. Those are good. I like those ideas.
Those are ideas.
We could shove in the Gamera series at a certain dollar amount.
Honestly, why not? It's there.
It's not Toho. That's why not.
Yeah, yes. But Japanese-produced films, and you know what, Joe? We have failed to mention...
I wonder how many other kaiju movies there are. I mean, there's not...
Gamera
Toho's kind of the big company,
yeah,
so
Gamera around the era that we were getting Abira and say even Son of Godzilla, because as one of the notes to that movie is Gamera was being produced around that time, and it was an attempt to kind of mimic what we were getting off of that, like the vibe of those films, because Gamera came out, he was the defender of the earth, unequivocally. He was not ever a bad guy, as far as I know so far. So yeah, we can do that. Anything else that the community can think of for us?
Yeah, please. If you have ideas for Patreon rewards, I would say things.
Tweet them at us at Drew Daybell, at Joseph DeGollier.
Do that. Please.
Yeah, really, please visit the Twitter if you have not already.
We want to satisfy you and cover our costs.
Somebody named G-Man gets reposted a lot on Twitter, and a lot of, like I said, the community's great, and so it's a fun thing to get on Twitter.
News.
Yeah,
exactly.
Especially with Shin Godzilla coming out, the legendary production films coming out, Kong Skull Island, so there's going to be a lot of news that'll come through Twitter.
All right, so Bainjram, since you left us an iTunes review, make sure you give us a message and give me your email, or send Drew a message on Twitter and give him your address.
DM me, bro. DM me.
That's just okay, and we'll get that taken care of. Guys, think of things we can give you for Patreon. Otherwise, me and Drew will just come up with something. And join us next time. We're gonna try to get a hold of the Japanese Varan.
The last thing that I can say about any money given to us through we'd prefer Patreon, of course, if you can give a small amount each month, but there's PayPal if you can just do a one-time donation.
Is there a PayPal link on the site?
Currently, there's a PayPal.
Yes, and there is. I set it up. That's right.
Works will be a Patreon. Okay. Joe, right. You just seem so happy.
There's
about
also
that.
a PayPal on GodzillaPodcast.com.
But
it took a lot of work to set up that entire network, and I did that almost entirely by myself. I was a pain in the butt. I am not a website website designer.
Joe deserves a kickback for all of his hard work on that.
I'm not going to take any kickback. I just want the show supported.
All right, and one last thing that we would definitely use those funds for is more research into things. Like we could get, I was looking up some...
I'd like to get some books.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are real college textbooks on the Godzilla films.
Yeah, we got our one Bible.
Yes.
It covers Ishiro Honda films.
But, we're starting to get into non-Ishiro Honda films. We've already covered several. And then there's something, the Godzilla Encyclopedia, is what I believe it's just called. Yeah. And, of course, helping us to collect these films, which, like with King Kong Escapes and the Japanese version, we've bought ourselves, and yet we're giving away, So we're going to use that to make the podcasts, because that's the
make the podcast pay for itself. That's all.
Yeah, that's all we could ask for.
If it doesn't, at least a little bit of help. If you can, give it, and if you want to,
we're not going away. So
yeah, does it? Yeah, we'll still be here regardless. So if you feel bad enough, that's fine. Drew, what's our theme song? Who provides our theme song? Drew?
Mecha G.
Mecha G. Go check them out. That's going to be in the description. We will see you guys next time.
Yeah, if as a last plug for Mecha G, a couple months ago, is telling me that they are going to be producing more music. He may possibly do an intro for us, and I can't remember where he's from, but I'll find that out. And they're going to do live shows that they want to make very theatrical. So it's going to be like theatrical Godzilla-themed music.
That sounds awesome.
That's it, Joe.
All right.
Thanks for listening.
We'll see you guys next time. We need a sign-off. We don't have a sign-off, Drew, and it's bugging the crap out of me. Every other show I have has a sign-off. They're usually dirty, and...
do you think we need to do a spur of the moment here?
I don't know, like, G out. I don't know. Keep it real, G.
Screonk. I think I'll be working on that, Joe.
Screonk.
We could just end with a fading out. Since we've been knocked on the way, we do the themes. Let's screonk fade out. Like, get quiet. Screonk.
I don't know how to screonk. That sounds. What does that sound like?
It's the onomatopoeia of Godzilla's
Screonk.
Screonk.
Screonk.